Welcome to my fourth video in my Dispy primer for Christian nationalism. In the last three or so videos, I've been dealing with what are in some ways almost presuppositional issues for the dispensationalist. There's certain worldview aspects that we have that we are bringing to the Christian nationalism discussion. And it's coloring the way that we think about these issues. And I'm challenging us to go back and rethink these issues. So in the first video, we considered, does eschatology really factor into how we're supposed to exercise divinely delegated authority in a sphere? And I've argued that it doesn't. But so many dispensationalists come to the discussion of Christian nationalism assuming it's some sort of a post-mill project. And in the second video, I addressed the fact that we have to differentiate between God's will, God's revealed will, and God's decretive will. So many dispensationalists rightly point out that God's revealed will, well, we might say it this way: God's decretive will is that things are going to get worse, Christians are going to suffer, and the world's waiting for a final Antichrist. And I believe all of that. That's not, though, God's revealed will for the exercise of divinely delegated authority. So we need to not confuse those two, but we often do in these discussions. We enter into the discussion and say, well, since God has revealed this is what the future holds, therefore, I just don't think that follows. Now, I think what's helpful at this point is to address another harmful presupposition that really has infected dispensationalism and even modern evangelicalism over the last, maybe really badly over the last 100 years, probably a little bit shorter than that. But that is the view that politics is some sort of dirty profession. There's a negative association with being a politician or being engaged in politics. And there's a sense in which that's not necessarily wrong. Politics can be a dirty thing, and many politicians are known for their scandals and their dishonesty. That's true. But what does God think about politics and politicians? Is it really a dirty business? And not only what does God think, what of our brothers who went before us in the generations and centuries before us? What did they think about politics? And maybe if I just illustrate this very quickly, if you were to hear a big, prominent, well-respected pastor today say, you know what, I'm raising my sons to go out and be civil engineers, the congregation would say, oh, that sounds good. I like that. If he said, I'm raising my sons to be medical doctors, I think most of the congregation would say, yeah, that sounds great. That's really encouraging. If he said, you know what, I'm raising all of my sons to go out and to be professors. I want them to be seminary professors, or I want them to be pastors. I'm training them to be pastors. The congregation say, oh, that's so great. We're encouraged by that. We're warmed by that. But if that pastor were to stand up in front of the congregation and say, you know what, I'm training my sons to be politicians and to go into politics, we would not get the same warm, fuzzy feeling. Why is that? Well, because we have a certain worldview about politics and politicians that I think is unbiblical and ahistorical. And it's really that presupposition bleeds into our view of Christian nationalism, and it has really informed the disengagement of dispensationalists and really evangelicals by and large over the last 50 to 70 years. So very quickly, this will be a shorter video than the last few. I want to just consider two things. Number one, God's view of politics and civil magistrates. Some of the greatest men who ever lived were kings. You think of Melchizedek. You think of David. David was a king. His son, Solomon. We have a whole book in the Bible on civil rule. I mean, that's literally what the book of Proverbs is. It's a book written by a king to the king's sons who are princes, and one of them would be a king. And it's all about how to be a righteous ruler. What did God think about Joseph being essentially second in charge of the nation? Think about all the men that were exalted to places of prominence. Think of Daniel. How about this one? God's own son. What is his office? He's a king. And maybe you don't find that all that compelling. But how about I go here? We are Calvinists, most of us dispensationalists. What did Calvin think about the civil magistrate? Listen to this, and I'm not saying I agree with him, but I want you to consider how far is this view from the view we have today, and might that be influencing why things are such a mess in this country? Here's what Calvin said in the Institute's 20.4. He says, "Wherefore, no man can doubt that civil authority is, in the sight of God, not only sacred and lawful, but the most sacred and by far the most honorable of all stations in mortal life." That is so far away from what modern Calvinists think. Why is that? Why have we taken on such a negative view of Christian political engagement, politics, politicians, the role of civil magistrate? Do we really have a biblical view? Do we really have a historical view? And how is this historical, biblical view influencing our view of Christian nationalism? That's something we need to think a little bit more deeply about.